You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak, and Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is the tail end of July. Still a lot of uncertainty, but as of today, it looks like the game of football will be played at some point. Mr. Harris, you got a lot of things going on outside of football. Congratulations. What else is going on in Albuquerque, New Mexico tonight?
Rumor has it I got engaged, and it was granted. Thank you for your congratulations. Not actually football news beyond the fact that I totally outkicked my coverage, as has most any man in the fantasy football industry.
Definitely. Because
certainly we don't deserve anything we get outside of scorn and ridicule.
Right. Touche.
And Kyle and I did a fantastic show last week. We sadly missed you. You're back in place.
I miss you guys,
gentlemen, I'm assuming everyone is healthy and well and ready to grind on some football information.
Absolutely.
All right. So, we talked last week about some of this COVID stuff. Look, the certainty within the uncertainty is the NFL's determination to forge forward. And we heard it even today as we recorded this pod on July 30th. Alan Sills, the league's director of medicine, the doctor, talked about this is going to be a unique situation. Football is not going to look like what it used to look like. We've got guys, opting out. We have guys going on the reserved COVID list, new things that are available to players and teams. We saw the Bills shut down practice today when they had 5 positive tests. Look, I think they're learning from other sports. Kyle, we saw the situation with baseball. I don't watch a lot of that, but I understand the Marlins had a big problem and maybe that team is being shut down. It seems like at least football is reacting as if they're learning from these other sports.
Yeah, I hope. I really do hope. And I mean, I don't know. We often think of the NFL as this kind of sort of bumbling franchise. Roger Goodell doesn't get much credit for any of the good. Basically, we only see he's the ref of the NFL. He is the ref of the organization that is the NFL. We only see his mistakes. We don't see just everything he does to grease the wheels and keep the machine rumbling on forward. So I do think we don't give them enough credit for just operating an incredibly large and vast organization, and that there are a lot of smart people behind the scenes who are, without a doubt, taking notes on what is going on in the MLB. I'm still not positive that the NFL season is going to be everything we hope it could be, but I do think my bet would still be for 16 games. What does that look like? How many players from the XFL show up? I don't know.
Right.
Certainly some, but...
Hey, and for me, that's the thing. Right? I mean, anything could happen, Justin. We could end up having no games as easily as we could have a full season, or even a full season that starts late and ends later. We just don't know. I guess what I'm taking some comfort in is the sheer level of determination. And something Kyle touched on, Roger Goodell, I remember a report early on in this, just said, hope is not a strategy. We're going to have plans for everything we can think of plans for. And I agree with what Kyle said 100%. Whatever you think of the persona or the front that Roger Goodell represents, this is a huge enterprise. And they've come a long ways, and they've overcome obstacles, whether it was free agency that the critics said they never should have had, the draft the critics said they never should have had, the virtual OTAs that, hey, we're not having conversations about, who's in the best shape of their career at this point. Maybe that'll come in another week or so, but they've put in what good Zoom students they are and things like that. Well, I mean, it was kind of a brave new world going forward. Just your expectations in general on what a season might look like with guys showing up maybe on game day even, and maybe their temperature is 101 and they don't let them in the locker room. What do you think we're going to be dealing with?
I tend to agree that MLB and the NBA tipped off tonight. It's going to be somewhat of serve as a template for the NFL season. And you guys know I like to say ambiguous, and I think that's exactly what this is day to day. We saw with Kenny Golladay, I mean, these guys were asymptomatic, so they're being tested, as a lot of employers are testing their employees, and a lot of guys don't have symptoms, but they are testing them. They're a silent transporter of the virus, which is really scary. So you don't necessarily have to be deathly ill to have it, but you can give it to somebody and get them deathly ill. So they're taking as many precautions as possible, as they should. But to put a plug on this at this stature, I would say is absolutely impossible. Would I bet that there's going to be a 16-game NFL season? Probably. I'm at like 50-50 right now. We saw the New England Patriots in the past couple days. Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower, and when you dig a little into it, most of these guys that I've read about that are opting out have legitimate reasons to. I mean, Chung has a small kid at home. He's at the tail end of his career. He's got a 75-year-old dad. Damien Williams, his mom, just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it goes on and on. Nate Solder had cancer, and his kid had cancer. So these aren't people being lazy. I mean, this is because I think it can be life and death. To call 2020 a wash wouldn't be the worst thing for the NFL or just all of us.
Just getting through it, however they get through it. Like if they made it through 8 games, I think, wow, that's kind of an accomplishment, given the circumstances. If they had no games, I would sit here and say, damn, there's no games. I'm hoping we can all, that's not good for any of us, right? I mean,
no.
If we can't, at some point, we all need to find a lane we can get through this, right? And and I think some of these things, something like the sports franchises where there's so much financial gain to be had,
sure.
This is kind of the American way. This is how we figure out our way into the next thing, right? Somebody wants to make some money and they figure out how to do something. So I do like that. So we mentioned the COVID reserve list and a number of players. You mentioned Kenny Golladay and TJ Hawkinson both on it. Today there were a handful of additions. Jay Sternberger, I believe Mason Crosby, Jeffrey Wilson Jr. Those guys add the guys like Justin Jefferson, Keyshawn Vaughn. This list I'm not so worried about. As Justin mentioned, if you have a positive test, or if you don't have a positive test and you're around someone who did, the teams won't announce whether the player tested positive. But the thing is, you can come off this list at any time. It's almost like the active pup list in that I believe you need a couple of negative tests to get back into the mix. And, guy may be on for a few days, maybe on for a few weeks. This will kind of play out. And I think this is one of the things we're going to have to get used to and not panic over as we're in the midst of our best ball drafts or whatever, kind of process we're in, slow dynasty drafts, whatever you're doing, kind of try, again, not to react to the minute by minute temporary situations. And that would be the reserve COVID-19 list. The opt-out list, there's a reason for some concern, right? Because guys are just done. They're calling it, they're calling it a season. And I think nobody, so far it's been not high end guys. Devin Funchess, if you're trying to figure this out, I don't see a lot of people drafting him. Maybe you're thinking, wow, this is a clear path to work for Alan Lazard, or, that's the thing. But Damien Williams is a whole other story, Kyle. So first of all, how does Clyde Edwards-Helaire jump to running back 6 in one day? I mean, it seems like we're already drafting him at his potential ceiling. Are you seeing that? And how far back are you dialing or not? Are you diving right in?
Yeah, so before the draft, I really wasn't very interested in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He wasn't, like he's small, he's not, extremely athletic, and he doesn't have this large history of production like you look at a guy like Jonathan Taylor, 2,000 yards from scrimmage back-to-back seasons, then goes as an early declare. He is the perfect prospect, minus some, but not even an awful receiving profile, a decent one, whereas Clyde Edwards-Helaire, one awesome season on the greatest offense in college football history, but then he goes to the Chiefs, and I still think there were some obvious concerns with Damien Williams, because despite the fact that, Damien Williams is not a special back, I think you can tell that by seeing the number of guys. I think I counted it was somewhere north of 10 different players, quarterbacks, wide receivers at one point, and running backs, all in different seasons, out-carried him. He was a backup to a number of, non-NFL caliber players in Miami, and, yeah, you can say they were a bad franchise. They were, but that doesn't ignore the fact that multiple coaches saw him and said, you're a third running back on a terrible team. And then they signed LaShawn McCoy, saying, further showing that they didn't have this utmost faith in him. He's not a special player. And I don't think, and I think it's important to know that when you realize that he was putting up like a touchdown per game when he was healthy. That's what playing on the Chiefs does for you. You score a crazy amount of fantasy points. Over the past 3 years, the Chiefs have had the 5th most running back touchdowns. When you play in an awesome offense, you're going to score a lot. And now they have, really nobody to take carries away. I think I'd be modestly concerned if a guy like Devonta Freeman got on board, or I guess if they traded for somebody, but it seemed like that's long since gone for a guy like Mostert or Fournette or whomever. But Darwin Thompson, Darrell Williams, these guys, DeAndre Washington, are not going to take away. And the thing I like the most is that both Darwin and DeAndre Washington are pass catching backs. That's the one role where I don't think we're going to see any amount of give from Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because that was his specialty. He's an amazing pass catcher out of the backfield. So I really think he has one of like a pretty reasonable projection as a top 10, 15 running back in terms of just market share numbers. And those market share numbers have to be inflated based on the value of each touch you get on the Chiefs. So I'm actually pretty much on board with taking him behind, for me, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon, Miles Sanders, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook. So that makes him 7. Is that what it is? 7 for me?
Yeah,
I think his ADP is actually fine.
Yeah, I think honestly, if you want him, that's where you're gonna have to get him. I feel for me the pivot is 404 for Jonathan Taylor, and I'm gonna be quite happy with that. But I do think that's where you have to take him, and the ceiling is high. But are we overlooking, Justin, one DeAndre Washington, the guy Kyle mentioned, who was pretty solid in a replacement role for Josh Jacobs for the Raiders last season? I think he had, 330 plus yards from scrimmage, a couple of TDs, 70 touches. He was fairly serviceable. Is he a guy we're overlooking? Is he a best ball flyer for you at the moment, or maybe even a handcuff for Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
No. It's that simple. And I tend to agree with Kyle. I wasn't high on him heading in. I still have a little bit of skepticism, but the opportunity is going to be there. You look at the playoff teams from last year, and the Chiefs are really the only team outside the top 10 in rushing that made the playoffs. So it's still a pass-heavy league. You do need to run the ball to win down the stretch. They're going to run the football. Andy Reid's got his new Brian Westbrook. Whether he can withstand the bulk, is to be determined. I cannot envision 20 touches a game right off the bat, but the rich certainly get richer. He's going to be in my top 15. I'm not compelled to draft a running back in the first round anyway, but the allure is definitely the fact that he's on the Kansas City Chiefs and the best offense in the NFL. We want a piece of it. So if you're not going to have him, you're going to have to grab Travis Kelce early. You're going to have to draft Tyreek Hill early. You're going to want a slice of that offense. It's going to go.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of in the middle between you guys. I feel fortunate that I felt like we were all, overpaying for Edwards-Helaire up to this point, right? And now I feel like we're all going to have to overpay for him. And in some cases, I'm going to be okay with that. Again, I'm about halfway between those guys. I'm right at the tail end of the running back one range. But you could easily make the same argument Kyle is, or Justin is. That is certainly the range of possible outcomes. Andy Reid has had a lot of success with rookie running backs over the course of his career, dating back to the Eagles, to Staley, Westbrook, as you mentioned, LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles in Kansas City, Kareem Hunt. More recently in Kansas City, although Hunt did not start right out of the chute, he needed an injury to get on the field to Spencer Ware. So there's all that. I guess, for me, this is more about finding a value a little later. I don't know that I want to buy guys at their ceiling, but this is a hell of an offense. Oh, in a kind of related move, one of the first thoughts was, wow, LaShawn McCoy's still out there, right? Maybe they bring him back and he can do nothing there again this year. Well, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided he could do nothing for them for the veteran salary of $1 million for 1 year. Justin, any interest in there, and how much does this mess with the guys like Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn, and even Dario Obungwale?
They did tie a lot of money to him. Obviously, they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn, who's going to have a role. I think Ronald Jones is the starter week one. I think his leash is probably going to be a little bit short, given his what he's done so far. But Bruce Arians seems to like him. I like him too. The hope is that the offensive line is beefed up, and I think it will be. Shady's if you think you're getting any semblance of the LaShawn McCoy that played with Andy Reid, which seems like 10 years ago, it's not going to happen. Probably best served to be left on the waiver wire. But again, Jones is going to be on a short leash. We don't, there's some skeptics about Keyshawn Vaughn. Another offense where we're going to want a piece of, and without having to pay that Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, premium, outside of Tom Brady. And I don't think you're going to be paying a premium for Rob Gronkowski anymore. So it's going to be somewhat of a committee, I think, down there. I don't know that LaShawn McCoy fits in it tonight.
Kyle Dvorchak, where's the value in this Tampa Bay Buccaneer offense? Go.
Yeah, I'm not awfully high on this offense because the reason this offense was so awesome last year was not that they were the most efficient offense. It's not they had a great quarterback. It's they had a lunatic for a quarterback who would throw into triple coverage, who would bomb them downfield, and he just didn't care. And I don't think we're going to get that from Brady. I do think there is some meeting in the middle of Brady with New England in a conservative offense with weapons that are not meant to be aggressive versus Arians running an aggressive offense with weapons that are meant to be aggressive. I think those get married somewhere in the middle, but I do think we saw Jameis was one of, I believe it's probably in the range of less than 15 quarterbacks ever to go for 5,000 yards. The only 30-30 season, he was doing insane things. Not always good, but insane things that are good for fantasy. And that is so much less likely, I think, to happen this year. So I'm not really paying up for Godwin. I'm not paying up for Evans. I think Ronald Jones is probably fine. And this, LaShawn McCoy looked mostly dusted last year. This doesn't bother me at all. And it is maybe a bit coincidental, but we see Keyshawn Vaughn go on the reserve COVID list. Doesn't mean he has it, but at least means that he came into contact with someone who is deemed at risk. And then 3 days later, they bring in at least an above average, deep veteran backup, an above average third or fourth back, you could call him. So I think if it would be an indictment of anything, which this could just be a camp body. They could just want to not have a 1 year of production Ronald Jones and a no years of production Keyshawn Vaughn as their starters. This might just be the right time to get LaShawn McCoy. But I do think if this were to be an indictment of anyone, it would be Vaughn. Overall, though, I'm just not awfully interested in this offense. Jones is an all right price for a guy who could get some volume, but that's about it.
Yeah, I have not a lot of shares of these guys either. I had no shares of Damien Williams, by the way, which makes me feel super good about all that. But I tend to agree with all these views. And I also think that, maybe McCoy is there as much to, kind of almost as to help the young guys, understand how a veteran works. I mean, I hate to say that's where he is in his career, but, he'd like to hit that 12,000 yards mark. He needs about 900 and change to get there.
That ain't happening.
He's going to need to chip away at that stone a few more than this year. So moving on from that one, a lot of Ravens talk in the last few days. Number one, I've been touting Marquise Hollywood Brown for one reason, because all the people last year who were telling me that Lamar Jackson was going to change the way offensive football is played have been telling me over the last 2-3 months that Marquise Brown is going to make a huge jump. I'm not saying a Lamar Jackson-like jump, but a huge jump. Then all of a sudden today, Lamar Jackson says it's going to be a huge jump for Marquise Brown. Now, you're not getting him at a huge discount based on his production last year, right? It was 46 catches. I mean, he had about 3 really good games, and the rest of the time. But he was dealing with the Liz Frank, had a screw in his foot that was removed in February. How much are you buying into this? I'm totally a sucker for this. I have taken it hook, line, and sinker, Justin. How stupid am I?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty with Brown. I think it starts with the injuries. I mean, the talent is obviously there, right? But you're talking about an offense that is heavily invested in the run. So it's going to be he's going to have up and down weeks. He's going to have those weeks where he's 5 for 120 and a touchdown, and he's going to be blank, 2 for 40. It's just not what they do in Baltimore. But another thing that needs to be said is the fact that Marquise Brown and Lamar Jackson have worked, which seems close together off the field, and cohesiveness and nonverbal communication. Those things go a long way as far as I'm concerned. So there's, he's a top 45-ish wide receiver tonight in my book. I'm fine with him. Am I confident playing him in my weekly lineup every week? Absolutely not. I think he's more of a guy that we'll talk about in DFS because of his ability to hit home runs, 7 touchdowns last year. The talent is there. Obviously, he's the cousin of Antonio Brown. So, there's some questions about whether AB will, join. I think Lamar Jackson, I think he wants
He
talent,
does.
right? I mean, I want some talent around me, and so he's wishful, but I have my doubts.
He's talked a lot about improving the deep passing game. Look, we saw flashes of it. We saw flashes of it from Marquise Brown. We saw flashes of it from Antonio Brown. And just to be clear, John Harbaugh chimed in, adding that Antonio not really in the conversation right now, although they are mindful of the things Lamar Jackson might want because, well, he's super good and they'd like him to be happy. But this all seems like a bit of a reach there. So, Kyle, you can go ahead and chime in on Marquise Brown if you want. But what is it about fantasy managers that makes us chase that 2013 Josh Gordon that we haven't seen really since 2013, or that 2015 Tyler Eifert? Oh, maybe it's just me that we haven't seen since 2015. And we're going to chase Antonio Brown until he's like 60 years old.
Yeah, so I think on Marquise Brown, he's fine where he's going. As a mid-wide receiver 3, I didn't think he was I didn't love him as a prospect coming out of college. He had a well below average breakout age, perfectly average college dominator. Just wasn't his big calling was just he was supposedly, and we didn't get combine testing from him, mega fast. And I believe that. I've seen him play. I can attest the dude looks fast. But also, he doesn't look like a guy who gets a lot of volume at 5'9" and 166. I think he's put on weight since coming into the league. But also, most players put on weight coming into the league. When we say he's under 170, and guys under 170 basically never hit wide receiver 1 seasons, that also includes the fact that, yeah, sure, he bulked up to 175, but the guys who came in just over 170 probably also bulked up to 180. So just based on the size he came in to the NFL, he doesn't look like a guy who, historically puts up big fantasy numbers. His college production wasn't that much impressive either. I still think, though, when you can be the number 1 receiver pretty clearly in close proximity to a player like Lamar Jackson, I get why he's going where he's going. Why do we chase Antonio Brown? Because he's so good. He is. I think it's difficult to say anyone other than Jerry Rice will ever be the best. Jerry Rice did it for so long. Like him and Tom Brady, the only players to ever catch a pass over the age of either 40 or 41. I think Brett Favre might sneak in there at 39 or 40. And he was putting up. I think he put up 1,000 yards at the age of 40. The dude, outside of him, you have to kind of cross him out to even talk about the history of wide receivers. Otherwise, he just makes the rest look like nothing. But Antonio Brown, up to the time when he was 31 years old, or I guess 30, because he didn't really play when he was 31, was one of the best receivers of all time, especially in his prime. So I think I understand why we chase it. And right now, his price isn't awful. I don't think people are once he gets a team, then he is going to shoot up, and that's really when you are going to have to gamble your entire team on getting him. Imagine if he were to sign with the Ravens, I literally think people take him in the second round, and you are gambling your entire draft that he doesn't do some dumb stuff, and that's when I really think people are going to be making grievous errors. At least right now, if you have to take him in the 12th, 13th, 14th, I think you can get him later, and it really depends on what format you're in. I know on drafters I was getting him the final picks, but in leagues with experts, he actually gets reasonable draft capital. If he does, and I don't think it's going to happen. If he does sign with a team, then that's when I'm very confidently going to say I love him. I love him as a player, but you just could not catch me buying a single share of him in the top 5-6 rounds. But yeah, he's really good. That's why we chase him, I guess, is the short answer of it.
His former team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, expressing confidence. Offensive coordinator Randy Fichtner, head coach Mike Tomlin. They have no worries about no preseason for one Ben Roethlisberger coming off the elbow surgery that kept him off the field for all but 2 games last season. With the mighty Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph ducking helmets, the Steelers threw for about 2,000 fewer yards than they did the year before. I think Ben was over 5,000 yards. Somebody correct me if I'm correct. I think 5,100 yards. And so look, we're expecting a lot of rebounds here, Justin. Are our hopes too high?
Well, not where you're going to get them in fantasy drafts. I mean, you're getting right around where we love it. Top 25, and you're probably fine with that. And as far as not being able to, this is year number 17. As far as I'm concerned, he's going to the Hall of Fame. There's no AB anymore. There's no Lev anymore. But they have gone out, and I think Juju is coming into his own. He's probably missed Ben as much as he's missed anybody in his life, considering the quarterback play from last season. You have Eric Ebron, who I think is, can be his new Heath Miller. I think you got a sound running game there. They drafted Anthony McFarland. You hope that James Conner can stay healthy. They drafted Chase Claypool. We're happy about Deontay Johnson and James Washington. So the pieces are there for Roethlisberger. I think with all this stuff going on, I think if anybody can just kind of get back into it as if he hasn't missed a step, it's probably a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, given his experience. So from a fantasy angle, absolutely, he's in that scope that we tend to have talked about for 5, 6, 7 years in best balls and season-long leagues that we'll take for nearly free. And I think if he's any semblance of what we've seen, and Father Time is catching up, so 5,000 yards is a lot to expect. He's going to be fine, and he'll be a top 15 to 20 quarterback for us, and that's going to be just fine.
I got to say, I saw a photo of him as he reported, and he looks pretty. I mean, in Roethlisberger, terms, he looked pretty lean and pretty fit. I was pretty impressed. Maybe he just cut most of the beard off, and maybe that's all it took.
Yeah, probably helped.
We'll find out. So the Dolphins, head coach Brian Flores, Tua Tagovailoa is not going to open camp on PUP. He'll practice without limitations once they start. Kyle, we had talked about this before, how the people who cover the team closely have sources on kind of both sides. Say the management and the coaching staff is kind of torn. The one notion is like, man, we just need to sit this guy down for a year and make sure he's fully healthy. The other notion is, man, throw him out there. If he beats out Ryan Fitzpatrick, more power to him. I will say that from my best ball perspective right now at this point in the process, I'm counting on some of these Dolphins to get a little something done. Can they do anything if the rookie is the guy at quarterback? Are we just assuming if he beats out Fitzpatrick, everything will be golden, or is there plenty of room for concern for you?
No, I honestly prefer if Tua is the quarterback, because I think Ryan Fitzpatrick gets a lot of credit for being like knockoff Jameis Winston, but also part of the reason Jameis Winston was so good is because he was so bad. That's his specialty, is being good at being bad. And Ryan Fitzpatrick is the same way. He wasn't efficient last year. A 6.7 adjusted yards per attempt is fine, but it doesn't make him an above average starter. He wasn't even he didn't even throw a crazy amount of touchdowns. A 4% touchdown rate is perfectly middle of the road. Threw a decent amount of interceptions. I think we'll just see this team increase in efficiency if we get Tua, and maybe they slow the pace down to let him get a grip on the offense better. But honestly, I want the best thing for me is to have a team that is running the most efficient offense possible. And not only that, but part of the reason we saw so much Ryan Fitzpatrick last year is their defense was god awful, and they didn't make any crazy you can't do anything to overhaul that bad of a defense in 1 year. It's still going to be that bad. I know they added Byron Jones, but they also played half a season last year with Minka Fitzpatrick and then lost him. They traded him. So I don't think I just can't see how this defense is going to be anything outside of maybe they go from second or third to last to bottom 7 or 8. But I think you just want your teams to, or your fantasy teams, if you're a fan of Miami or not, you want your fantasy teams to be laden with players who are on efficient teams. That's why I'm not really chasing garbage time, because usually that means an offense is bad. That's why you never chase the one season of Blake Bortles. You don't want what if Blake Bortles is so bad he's good? I just want my teams to be good. And Tua is really good. If he'd thrown enough pass attempts in his final college season, he was hurt too early in the season to qualify, but he would have 2 of the top 5 greatest all-time adjusted yards per attempt seasons in college football. And the only guys that do that are Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow. It's number 1 overall picks. He is the quality of a number 1 overall pick, and I want him to get on the field as soon as possible.
Blake Bortles coming to a milk carton near you soon.
I will just say this real quick to interject here. I think, the AFC East is going to be wide open. So if you're Brian Flores, if you're going to beat Bill Belichick, the time is now. The other thing is, from a mentoring standpoint, we know Ryan Fitzpatrick has been erratic, but I think there's a lot to be learned from him if you're a young guy in terms of being cerebral and being gutsy and toughness. And I think those are all variables that you want to see in your quarterback that you've invested so heavily in on. So where the gifts fly about Ryan Fitzpatrick, the guy is tough, no doubt. He's obviously intellectual, and it wouldn't be the worst thing for Tua to sit and watch, opposed to getting just thrown into the flames in this bizarre year of 2020.
Flores has a chance. Belichick wants to get beat. Clearly, he sent six guys home. Trevor Lawrence is coming. Tank time.
You've been saying this, yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, Twitter told me this, and Twitter never lies. I have it on good authority. So Kyle Matt Nagy says Nick Foles is at a disadvantage in the quarterback competition without off-season workouts. There's the notion that Mitchell Trubisky is in the lead here or has a firm insider lead. Does that disadvantage us as fantasy owners?
Yeah, so I think obviously it is a disadvantage for Nick Foles just to not have a full off season with the team. But I think the biggest disadvantage of all is being as bad as Mitchell Trubisky. Can't throw to one side. I think it's the left side they say he can't. He just chooses to never throw to. He's been inefficient, save for 1 year of fluky touchdown production. He wasn't running a ton last year, which was his big calling. He's he legit has low key running back level athleticism, especially in his agility. But if he's not using it, what is even the point of having a Mitchell Trubisky? So I want Nick Foles to start, but it is disappointing because I think he's probably better, although not that good anyways. But it is a bit disappointing that Matt Nagy says he's at a disadvantage because he's probably the guy who gets to make that decision if he gets to play or not. So just like with the two Ryan Fitzpatrick, I want whoever I think the best quarterback is to start, just for the sake of offense and fantasy points. I think that's Nick Foles. But the difference between Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky isn't a gulf, and I think this doesn't change. They're both not very good, and this doesn't change. Maybe it decreases the odds of Nick Foles starting at week 1 by 10 or 15%. It's small calculations on the margins. I still think Allen Robinson has enough volume to be really good, despite whatever quarterback he's playing under. And outside of that, maybe Tariq Cohen. Tariq Cohen's perfect for these guys. Just bad quarterbacks, just check down. Don't try and throw deep. So it doesn't really change too much for me. Maybe I'd downgrade Anthony Miller, but I don't have any of them anyway, so who cares?
David Montgomery, again, the Bears talking about making a more concerted effort to run the ball. He seems like he's the tail end, maybe moving up a little bit. I'm looking at the latest ADP. Seems like he's the tail end of guys with clear paths to workload. I realize Tariq Cohen is there. I think he's a kind of a different kind of player. Justin, how many rosters will David Montgomery be on of yours?
Probably more than he should be, but where I draft wide receivers, it's kind of hilarious because they, part ways with Jordan Howard, who was pretty good in Chicago when you look at the numbers, and then they replaced him with just a younger version of Jordan Howard. So, and what that is a volume plotter, in my opinion. So they're another run-oriented football team. I think that he'll get the football 200 but non-existent in the passing game, which we don't like, but somewhere around 250, 260 carries. We like that, and we're certainly fine with him if the price is right. So he's going to get the football. He's probably going to plod. Not really impressive at all, but what the hell? He gets the ball enough. He's going to rush for 1,000 yards, 6-7 touchdowns. I'm fine with it, but he's not that great.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment in general. All right, guys, there's a couple of, issues lingering around here, and we're seeing it now as players come in and open camp on the PUP list, the active PUP list, which means they can come off whenever they're healthy. And in particular, a couple guys that struck me, Alshon Jeffrey, an older receiver, 30-ish years old, coming off a Liz Frank injury. This is not easy, but nobody's giving up on him there, which I find interesting. And then Corey Davis, I've seen some predictions. I believe ESPN had a prediction from their NFL Nation beat writer there that maybe Davis was on the verge of his breakout. Well, about time for that, but he needs to be healthy to do that. So I guess the question for me, Kyle, is, not necessarily these guys in particular, but are you using to leverage that designation and get some free flyers on some guys that maybe have a little bit of upside? And yes, I realize when I say this, I'm suggesting Alshon Jeffrey and Corey Davis have some upside if you get them for free.
Yeah, I think it's very situation dependent. Alshon Jeffrey seems truly like he could end up not starting the season. I know basically all offseason has been pretty rough reports on him, whereas Corey Davis, this is a bit more of a surprise, and I think it seems more likely to be just a short-term injury. And yeah, I've already been interested in Corey Davis, and this, assuming no further bad reports come out that this could actually hold him out early into the season, I'd be using this for, if it gets me a discount on Corey Davis, great, because I already have some of him. Couldn't find me drafting Alshon Jeffrey if he was the last receiver on if I went 10 running backs in a row to start a draft, I still wouldn't take him in the 20th round. He just looks so dusted. They clearly see that by like taking multiple weapons, both, tight ends, Dallas Goedert a few years ago, Jalen Reagor, Quez Watkins, John Hightower, I believe. Like they clearly need depth. They recognize that as a need. And also, I guess, unfortunately, although it doesn't work out, I guess, unfortunate, fortunate, whatever. Good, do what you have to do. Marquise Goodwin, also not there, so maybe it doesn't work out. But they have made a clear effort to pad the depth of their receiving core and the top end by getting Jalen Reagor. I think that is an obvious indictment of Alshon Jeffrey. Interestingly, Deshaun Jackson, one of 18 players ever to have more 10 or more 150-yard games. Grown-ass man metrics. You can find it on my Twitter. He is surprisingly just like an incredible producer. Like he is in the same stratosphere that we talk about guys like Isaac Bruce in terms of just these crazy explosive games. Guys like Julio Jones, AJ Green, T.Y. Hilton also surprisingly makes an appearance on that list. It's just getting on the field a lot with a good quarterback and being as fast and also just as good of a receiver. He's not only just a sprinter, he's also a pretty talented receiver. Deshaun Jackson, probably smart to be getting shares of now.
Yeah, and that's I agree with you. And Justin, any other items that are out there? What are you looking at to gain edges in some of these drafts? Because we're all, and I've been drafting best ball with serious listeners of our program, and they're all paying attention to us. They're paying attention to the website. They're following the rankings clearly, whether it's the consensus rankings or whatever. Because they're making smart picks. How are you gaining an edge? What are you using to leverage right now to get a little ahead in best ball?
Well, I think this Corey Davis thing was a perfect example of it. You look at the Titans offense and there were high hopes for Corey Davis, and I'm not ruling him dead at age 25. Just because Kenny Golladay ended up on a list and TJ Hawkinson doesn't mean we're going to fade them necessarily, and we should not. It's a little more severe when they do opt out because now, again, like you said, you mentioned Funchess, not that we like him. In fact,
right.
We hate him. It opens up opportunities for Allen Lazard. For certain. So it's changing day to day, and you're getting lucky. Like you didn't have any Damien Williams, now you're happier than a pig in shit because he opted out. And now everybody has to bite the bullet that did draft him. So just going day to day with it.
Yeah, I think the advice I have is the same I have every year. Don't look down the drinking straw. Don't get caught up in the moment by moment changes. You play the long game, and when you see an item, yes, we want to jump in as fantasy managers. That's our nature, is to jump in and leverage these short-term moves because we're following them. But sometimes the smarter play is to ignore the short-term moves and play the long game. So that would be my suggestion. Also, my suggestion, if you're listening to this and you're not a subscriber to footballdiehards.com website, go to footballdiehards.com/free trial and check it out. See articles by Kyle. See the work of one Justin Lonero. He's a genius. I'm telling you this now because you need to know. And also, if you are already a subscriber, go ahead and use the promo code DieHards when you sign up. You get 15% off the website, and got some great new stuff. Emil Cadlick's been working on some great stuff. My Fantasy GM, it marries your roster-specific data with our technology, helps you manage all your teams. We can go across all the platforms right now, wherever you play, NFL, Yahoo, CBS, ESPN, My Fantasy League, Sleeper app, any of these things. You can draw all your rosters into one place. Search for players across all the platforms. You search your opponents' rosters, analyze them, get the edge on free agent moves, get the edge on roster optimization, which this will also handle. So tons of great stuff. You should check it all out at footballdiehards.com, the home of this very podcast, manned by these capable young men and even by myself, the older fellow. I'm Bob Harris. He's Justin Lonero. And he's Kyle Dvorchak. And what are all the Twitter handles, Justin?
Oh, well, Kyle changes his every 6 months.
I've changed it once in my life.
You're at Football Die Hard, myself at Justin Lonero, and Kyle tweets here.
Correct.
Is so six times.
A good man knows his limitations. I know my limitations. The Twitter thing, man, it confuses me. Don't get me started on the Instagram or the other things. The tickety talk is the one that gets me.
We are weekly now, I gather. Going forward?
Yeah, we'll go weekly going forward. So everyone check back next week and we'll get busy and we'll catch you then.
Cool. Have a good night.